All right, let's get to our next term, which is on your packet on part 2. We are down all the way to where it says grapes and fruit trees. So, grapes and fruit trees. This is significant in the world of agriculture. During Pax Mongolica, on the Silk Road, the Mongols were able to bring grapes and fruit trees into China, which increased their food supply. Historically significant, because when you increase your food supply and nutritional value, your people live longer. Okay, let's get to our next one, which is pepper, cinnamon, and tea. Luxury items. Luxury items like pepper, cinnamon, and tea were introduced to the Muslim world from China. So these goods in the exchange, these luxury goods, the Muslims are willing to pay for them, and they get brought and are introduced into foods into the Muslim world. Pepper, cinnamon, tea add spice, add flavor. Are luxury goods. They're not necessarily needed, but they are wanted, and they increase the trade that's going on in the Silk Road. So they increase the product of trade. That's why they are historically significant. Our next two terms are block printing and gunpowder, and these are basically technological ideas that are transferred in the Silk Road from China to the Muslim world and beyond. Silk Road and Indian Ocean trade route. Basically, block printing is our first form of a printing press, which means that you don't have to write all the books by hand. There's blocks that can now print them, so you can mass produce books for government documents, for reading, which increases the number of books that are able to be made and printed around the world. Very significant for increasing literacy, increasing reading, and also messages, and it's a form of technology that gets passed on the Silk Road along with gunpowder, which is first invented in China, and it is used for firecrackers. Later on, gunpowder gets traded on the Silk Road. The Chinese are in the process of making an early, basically kind of like rocket or gun out of gunpowder. The Mongols discover it, and they are able to use it, and they are able to facilitate gunpowder and spread it to different parts of the world, where then eventually it will become used in bigger rockets and eventually firearms and guns, which ironically will get used against China when they're taken over by Europe later and other people. So gunpowder will change the face of war drastically, and this gets spread during the Silk Road by the Mongols, who get it from China and then spread those ideas to other parts of the world during Pax Mongolica. The Crusades. The Crusades were launched in Europe. They were launched by the Pope originally, and the reason why the Crusades happened was because the Christians wanted to try to reclaim the Holy Land back from the Muslims. Now, there were several crusades that went here with the idea of taking over the Holy Land. The Crusaders actually are able to take over the Holy Land for about 90 years in the 1100s, end of the 1000s, into the 1100s, 11th and 12th century. Eventually the Muslims regained the Holy Land back, but the Crusades, there are many more attempts that are tried to take the Holy Land, all of them after that fail. However, the Crusades are very significant for Europe because it's more of a one-way transfer. The Europeans aren't bringing a lot of things to the Muslims in the Crusades when they go into the land of the Muslims right over here into them. They get a kind of like a peek into Dar al-Islam. What happens is, as the Crusades go into the Muslim world, they're able to bring back all these advanced ideas that the Muslim world has because they've been involved in the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean trade route and the Trans-Saharan trade route for so long. So this is really an inspiration for the Europeans, so they can see everything that's been going on in the Muslim world. They're able to bring it back, and that will cause a huge increase in education in Europe and will allow Europe to start advancing. If you wonder why I've been talking about Europe that much lately, is because Europe isn't that advanced in this time period. That'll change when we get to the early modern period. That'll change greatly. Arabic numbers in the decimal system were used commonly in the Muslim world. However, they were not used in Europe. During the Crusades, when the Crusaders go to the Muslim world, they discover Arabic numerals, which look a lot like our numbers, and they are able to use a decimal system, which is able to increase mathematics in Europe as well. The Muslim world had been using this a long time. It's why they were so advanced in concepts like algebra. And during the Crusades, the Europeans get this mathematical concept by going to the Muslim world and are able to bring it back to advance their own mathematics in Europe in the post-classical era. Chess, which is an awesome game to play. A few of you probably play chess. I'll take you on sometime, and I'll beat your ass on it. And most likely, well, a couple people can beat me, but not many students. So anyway, chess is a game that is also, it's a game that you can play. It is also brought back during the Crusades. If this one gets picked, you don't have to put very much for it. Basically, chess is a game that is brought back to Europe during the times of the Crusades. Historically significant because it again shows a cultural transfer between the Islamic world and Europe. Yogurt, coffee, sugar, and dates. Not like going on a date, but a date you can eat. Alright. Really bad joke. Sorry, not even funny. But yogurt, coffee, sugar, and dates were also introduced to Europe during the Crusades. Basically, when the Europeans again went into the Muslim world, they were able to bring back a lot of these different foods and bring them back into Europe, which is able to increase the diet of Europe, and I mean coffee. Who doesn't love coffee? Anyway, so that is able to advance Europe even more with food, cultural exchanges, which keeps Europe advancing. I want to get to our next term, which is Aristotle. Aristotle, he was a Greek philosopher. He was the person, if you remember, who actually taught Alexander the Great. Aristotle is important during the post-classical period because Aristotle wasn't in Europe, even though he was Greek. They had stopped reading him because they believed in Christianity, and Catholicism had was basically the most powerful institution of Europe at that time. And Europeans weren't reading Aristotle because he was a pagan. He didn't believe in Christianity. He wasn't monotheistic. The Muslims didn't have a problem with that. They were reading Aristotle. They were advancing Greek knowledge. What happened is that the Europeans went in here and they kind of rediscovered Aristotle, and actually a lot of it was translated back from Arabic back into European languages like Latin at that time. So the Muslims kept Aristotle going. They kept reading the Greek works. When the Crusades happened, the Europeans go into the Muslim world and are able to bring this back. Next word is the Renaissance. And we didn't talk about this very much. It is a cultural flowering. It is basically of Europe. Kind of after the Crusades, Europe is able to really start advancing in art. There are many city-states, like in Italy, that are able to grow during this time period. And they're able to advance because of getting all the knowledge that came from the Muslim world that they were able to bring back to Italy, city-states like Florence, and then spread to the rest of Europe. Zheng He. Zheng He is known as a naval admiral who's able to take his huge treasure fleet ships, over 300 of them, and travel all over the Indian Ocean trade basin from China all the way to Africa. He's projecting Chinese power and basically letting the world know that China is in power and charge of the seas. He's a Muslim and a eunuch, which means he had something cut off. So he was able to basically be the admiral, project power all over the Indian Ocean trade route at this time, which wasn't really done so much to increase the trade, but basically to show the world the power that China had, that China was the dominant power in the seas. Unfortunately, the Ming Dynasty, which is when this happened, the Ming Dynasty, after they had taken over their land back from the Mongols, they did this to show China's power, but then they decided to burn all the ships and focus on building the Great Wall, focus on agriculture, and keeping China interior and working on the interior of China, and not to be engaged with trade and activities with the barbarians or the people outside of China. Which is too bad in some ways. If China had kept going with these ships, it's possible they could have even gone to the Americas. They could have increased their trade. but instead this will kind of be the beginning of a really downward slope for China, which goes from the Ming Dynasty all the way up until about 1945, 1950 or so. That is Zheng He.